One of the big problems is going to be on the distribution cycle. I have a researcher friend who's modeled 12% of all of the U.S. distribution infrastructure and then assumed, what if we did full electrification? And what he's found is about $10 trillion in distribution level improvements.
10 trillion?
10 trillion, and that will dwarf what we need to do on the generation side.
There's definitely capital. The question is the cost of that capital. Both on the equity side and on the debt side, the cost is going up. And so that really then leads to higher prices on the offtake and on the energy side. So how do we address that, and whether the market's going to get comfortable with the new normal, or what would even new normal be, it's still TBD. However, as based on this conference, things are very vibrant still, and we have a lot of good things going on in the future.
Oh, this is where it gets exciting. What we're building towards is a world where digital tools help assets autonomously optimize themselves and know what they need. And there will always be a human in the loop, right? These are real, capital-intensive, complex assets. But what we're working towards is a world where we're streaming data in from these assets, we're printing tickets to O&M suppliers to go perform proactive maintenance, and we're autonomously adjusting the control settings of the assets so that they're in real time always extracting the maximum amount of clean, renewable energy.
We're in challenging times for clean energy. It's an uncertain policy environment, so if you're a developer or a utility, you're going to want to optimize your existing assets as much as you can. I'm Sylvia Leyva Martinez, Research Director at the energy data and analytics company Wood Mackenzie, where I cover global solar markets. And we're here at RE Plus in Las Vegas, where all the talk is about how technology can address the issues we're seeing in the market right now. It's a tough time for wind in particular. U.S. wind installations last year hit the lowest installation mark since 2013. But the short-term forecast is not all bad. The pipeline for onshore wind has 10.8 gigawatts currently sitting in the queue through 2027, with another 3.9 gigawatts announced a couple of months ago. In one of our recent episodes, we discussed that projects under construction will likely be completed, but announced projects will face greater challenges. It's an example of a complex set of market dynamics that requires innovative thinking to address them, and that's exactly what I want to talk about with my next guest. Alex Bamberger is VP of Digital Solutions at RES. Alex and his team use both detailed data and advanced hardware to optimize asset performance across wind, solar, and storage.
What we're building towards is a world where digital tools help assets autonomously optimize themselves and know what they need. And there will always be a human in the loop, right? These are real, capital-intensive, complex assets. But what we're working towards is a world where we're streaming data in from these assets, we're printing tickets to O&M suppliers to go perform proactive maintenance, and we're autonomously adjusting the control settings of the assets so that they're in real time always extracting the maximum amount of clean, renewable energy.
I want to focus on wind in this conversation because, as I said earlier, it's a turbulent time for the sector. Asset operators want to get the most out of their sites. Alex joins me now to tell us how it can be done. Alex, welcome to the Interchange. So we're just getting started at RE+. And one of the things that I've already discussed over the past few hours that I've been in Vegas is this shift from, instead of focusing on early development projects, it's more towards operating assets, so trying to squeeze the most value of projects that are already operating. So how are you seeing that? Is that a trend that RES is really observing, or how is it from your perspective?
Yeah, we're definitely observing that in the market, right? I mean, demand for renewable energy is still there. The demand for more power generation on the grid is still there, and investors still want returns on assets. And so we're definitely seeing a shift into optimizing the existing asset base that is installed in the world. And that is something that we're really focused on at RES to help our customers get every last megawatt hour of renewable clean energy out of their assets.
And how is that possible? Because I would think there's already so much competition, the operating base is already well established. So isn't that optimization already at its limit, or what options are you exploring there?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think there's a lot of focus on this. So we've been really paying attention to utilizing digital technologies to help extract as much value as possible out of these assets. And what we're really doing at RES is trying to bring together engineering expertise of solving individual problems, but then building that on top of digital technologies that allow us to do it more at scale and bring that to the market to help us meet our clean energy goals.
So when you say like digital, because there are like so many options, it's quite vague. So tell me more about it. Like, is it new software, new hardware? How does it look? And I know that the story is very different between wind, solar, and storage. So could you elaborate more on that?
Yeah, definitely. So it's a mix of hardware and software. From the software perspective, what we're really trying to do is open up the data availability from assets.
Okay.
So when it comes to like wind turbines, for example, trying to open up OEM-level data access to those turbines. So much more than you would typically get in your SCADA system that most people are utilizing to optimize those assets. We also deploy autonomous drone technology, for example, to capture high-resolution images of blades, which are a very important portion of a wind turbine. And then on the storage front, we're bringing that actually up the value chain, and we're finding that applying that technology to more of a control setting is actually helping our customers optimize those assets.
So it seems like Dimension is a mix between hardware and software depending on the technology that you're working on, right?
Precisely.
And how do you come up with like those innovative solutions? Because I think it's very difficult going from what is already established to, let's explore, what if we use a drone? What if we install these new software, this new technology? How does it work at RES to make sure that you have this right balance between maintaining the operational efficiency of the assets, but also being adventurous enough to be able to explore all these innovative solutions that you're talking about?
Yeah, I think there's two ways to look at that. So first is we take a two-step approach. One is, I guess I'll use an analogy, right? You don't want to turbocharge your car if your tires are bald. Right?
Yeah.
And so really the first step is getting that asset up to like standard operating, taking a really deep look at it, leveraging the data and then the analytics and then subject matter expertise on top of that to ensure that that asset has, no pitch imbalance on the rotor, things like that are going to cause it to have more loads. And once we can bring it up to its standard operating point and where it was designed to be, then we can take that next step of turbocharging the car, for example.
Yes.
But then, it still takes, and we have to lean back and leverage our 40 years of engineering history. And so what we do is we take a really step-by-step approach. We don't go all at once. We do a little bit and a little bit and a little bit. And what we're really working towards is actually an asset that can autonomously optimize itself step by step, little bit by little bit. And that's future, very much in the future. But that's what we're working towards.
Okay, that's awesome. And we were discussing a bit earlier in the episode about how the mindset of developers, of asset owners has been changing. I think over the past few months, like this shift from a focus on early stage and trying to sign as many projects as possible to probably just focusing on operating assets. So this is probably going to drive to an extension of project timelines just because of the natural delays that we're already seeing. So does that translate directly into an opportunity to squeeze more value of the operating assets or to just extend the value of the assets that someone has already in their fleet?
Absolutely. I think that the dynamic that I'm seeing is current development projects are falling into two buckets, right? Those that can be safe harbored, and those are getting the supercharged investment and effort, right, to bring them to fruition as quickly as possible.
Yes.
And the other ones are put a little bit more on the back burner. And we've seen this cycle, 10 plus years ago. For anyone who was around then, we've seen that. And then what that's causing people to do, though, is right there's still that need for more renewable energy on the grid. There's still power demand is rising, and so where are we going to get that from? And so we're definitely seeing customers. I've spoken with some customers recently. We spoke with them 6 or 8 months ago, wasn't as much of an interest, and now there's much more interest in taking their eyes back to that operational fleet and squeezing every little bit out of it that they can.
I think you kind of already answered this question, but like, what is the difference between the cycles that we have already seen in solar? Is the solar coaster, right? I don't know if there is like a similar term for wind that I don't know about.
There was one, the PTC coaster, we can call it. It's a terrible name, but
I think I prefer solar coaster. Anyway, so like, what is different this time around? So I think now you already mentioned like this boom in AI data centers, and everyone's everyone has in mind that there is going to be an increase in load, and that is inevitable, and we need to find out a way to meet all that new demand. What are you seeing that is different this time around? And probably it's exactly what I just mentioned.
Yeah, I think thinking back to the early 2010s, it was the same incentive structure, and it just got it would fall off of a cliff, and then they would extend it, and we usually had an idea that they were going to extend it. Whereas I think what's different this time is, we had a program that was meant to be a slow ramp down of the incentives for the entire industry, and now at a relative surprise, it's gone. And the future, I think, is a lot more uncertain now than it ever has been. But to your point, that's in the face of a lot of growing power demand on the grid. And so, we know that people are going to want this. We hear large investment companies talking about the fact that even when they're talking with hyperscalers about their offtake plans, renewables are still the cheapest option to procure for data centers. And so I think that the natural market and economic forces are still there for us to be a really successful industry. It's going to be rocky, but I think it's all still there.
Yeah, and that's true. Like, we're coming from this era of the Inflation Reduction Act, and everyone was so excited, and now these times of so much volatility and things changing so fast that I think, or my perception is that everyone is just trying to figure out, like, okay, how do I make the most out of this volatility, and how do I ensure that the assets I already have survive and I get the most value out of them? But also for projects in earlier stages, like, how do I try to, I don't know if the correct word is salvage, but just try to make the most out of the situation right now and make sure that I have enough to continue operating as a company over the next few years. So we'll see what happens. And then, so right now, like, what's the main challenge that you're addressing with RES's digital plus subject matter expertise?
So what we find is our customers tend to be asset owners, and given the higher interest rate environment that we've seen, and you could say that it's going to stay like that for a little while, that has pushed renewable portfolios and driven them to increase their yields, right? And it's brought their net present values down. And so what our customers really want is to increase those yields, and we can really help them with that through these types of optimizations where we're increasing the output of their existing portfolio, which then makes their offering look a little bit more competitive in the financial marketplace.
Okay, so like, at what point of the development process are you involved? Like, or is it a way that the data and all the insights that you're getting from operating assets is helping rethink financial modeling for earlier stage projects?
We tend to get involved, especially in our wind optimization area, later in the asset's life, maybe after 5 to 10 years.
Okay.
Once it's maybe diverged a little bit from its normal operations, and that potential is really there to improve the output and the performance of the asset.
Okay.
And that's on the wind side. And then on storage, though, we actually get involved more at the construction phase with our Resolve EMS, which helps customers really aggregate a site together and then deliver that smoothly through a lot of commissioning and engineering services. And so then, because we're there with the control system, that allows that asset actually to react more smoothly to a lot of this market volatility that we're seeing.
Okay, and are you seeing more activity on one technology versus the other? Like, more interest on still like existing wind assets versus projects? Storage projects that are under construction?
I would say our focus is pretty even between new construction and storage projects, which we're seeing a bit of an acceleration of globally, even within the U.S. and outside the U.S. And then probably about equal focus on how can we optimize our existing wind fleet, particularly with some of the changes that we've seen, and that focus to the operational fleet.
Okay, perfect. And how, you mentioned digital and some of the solutions that you're implementing at RES, but how are these new digital solutions changing the way that people are thinking about O&M? Like, I think there has been this like transition from reactive maintenance to, I think it's preventive and then predictive, right? I think that's the order. But I think right now we're seeing an even more sophisticated shift. We hear about AI, we hear about data-driven insights. So what are the changes that you're seeing in this philosophy towards O&M?
Yeah, we're definitely seeing people move down that chain away from scheduled maintenance to more proactive and then predictive. What we really do with our customers is help them unlock additional data from their asset and then give them the tools to interact with that asset. So if there is an unexpected event, give them the tools to more quickly find the actual root cause, and then rectify it, but almost with OEM-level compatibility and ability to interact with that turbine.
So you and your team are developing solutions for wind, solar, and storage. So can you explain a bit more about the process that you follow to use data to improve the performance for all of these assets? And maybe like it's different for each of these technologies.
Yeah, look, it can be a little bit different, but I think overall the process is the same.
Okay.
So what we try to do is capture as much data as possible. And,
Okay.
and one thing that's different is we really focus on doing that at the edge. Anyone who's tried to network and integrate massive amounts of data from these assets knows that yes, there's a lot you can do with that, especially if you can get it all in the cloud, but there's a lot of challenges to get to that point. And what we want to do is help our customers in the industry get all of the benefit that they can now. So what we do is we really go to the edge where the asset is, and we try to collect as much data as possible through a variety of different methods. And then what we do is we apply subject matter expertise to that data to help provide some insight into what's actually happening at that asset. And sometimes that's value enough to understand the asset and what could be going wrong or where there's opportunity for improvement. But then what we really like to do within digital solutions, which we feel is differentiated, is because we have 40 years of engineering heritage at RES, we can then actually help the customer make changes to that asset, change some settings in their inverter, for example, change some settings in their wind turbine that are going to either fix that issue or bring more energy out of that asset.
And how, for example, for your clients, like how do you know how is the decision taken? Like you need to have some sort of investment on the O&M side, but there has to be enough value for them so that it helps reduce costs some other way or increase the revenue from their existing assets. So how does that conversation go?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and it depends on the customer. So typically when it's tools that are around improving the availability or improving the operations of the asset, that's more of a gut feel around like what it's going to bring to because it's so hard once you try to put that on paper in terms of like actual percentages. It's really challenging. When we're actually improving the performance of the asset, we've done a lot of work, and actually a lot of it is open source work that we've done to try to make it as open as possible around actually accurately measuring the uplift that we've provided to that asset. And then what we ask our customers is that we have a value share of that uplift and you know that additional value that we're bringing to the asset, the additional cash flow. And we like to share in that with them.
Awesome. And can you share actually some direct examples of either increased output in a certain asset or reduced costs and maintenance some other way, like just some of the case studies from some of the solutions that you have implemented? Yeah,
absolutely. I'll go over two. So one, we had a wind farm that was in Scotland. We worked with a key customer on. So we provided some hardware upgrades, and that did give 4.1% AEP uplift, which is a massive number, and that's much higher than we would normally expect for the work that we do. And that was some hardware upgrades on the blades. But then we actually went in and retuned the control system to take the best advantage of those upgrades, and we're able to get them an additional 1% from that digital upgrade to the wind turbines. So that was 5.1% on that asset, which is pretty substantial. Another asset in Northern Ireland, we did some work with them around, we were tuning that asset to the wind regime there, as well as performing some really advanced wake management. We were able to get 3.6% there, and 2.1% of that uplift was actually from just tuning that asset to the type of wind that it was seeing.
Wow, so effectively it's like processing all the information that you can get from the asset and using that to change the operational parameters or even making changes on the hardware side too in order to increase the efficiency. And that's definitely something that more and more customers, I bet, are looking for.
Yeah, exactly. And if we put that into the perspective of the industry as a whole, right, I think the installed base in the U.S. is 130, 140 gigawatts. And last year we did about 4 gigawatts. So that's about a 3% increase.
Yep.
So if you can get a 3% increase out of the fleet, that's about a year's worth of last year's velocity of new wind installations. And so if you look out, say, the next 10 years, right, if we can provide that level of improvement to the entire fleet, that's 10%, right, of our next decade's worth of progress in clean renewable energy. So it's a substantial material piece of the puzzle for how we progress.
Yes, and it's definitely aligned with this need to have more energy now. It doesn't necessarily have to come from new assets. From the examples that you're mentioning, is just trying to get more from whatever is already operating, and there are definitely solutions for that. We already talked about things that you and your team are already doing now, what should we expect over the next 5-10 years? Like, how do you see the entire asset optimization efforts changing over time?
Oh, this is where it gets exciting. What we're building towards is a world where digital tools help assets autonomously optimize themselves and know what they need. And there will always be a human in the loop, right? These are real, capital-intensive, complex assets.
Yep.
But what we're working towards is a world where we're streaming data in from these assets. We're printing tickets to O&M suppliers to go perform proactive maintenance, and we're autonomously adjusting the control settings of the assets so that they're in real time always extracting the maximum amount of clean, renewable energy.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to that. Then
Me too.
I'm excited to see what you and the rest of the REST team comes up over the next few years. So, Alex, thank you so much for joining me. This has been really, really exciting. Looking forward to what's going to be next.
Yeah, thanks. It was great speaking with you. Enjoy the rest of the show.
You too. Now I want to shift focus away from wind power and look at the grid. You just heard from Alex about how existing wind assets are optimized. But what about optimizing the grid itself? There's more strain on it than ever, so what can be done? To find out, I spoke with Kay Aikin, systems architect, energy strategist, and entrepreneur. Kay says we need to move beyond building infrastructure and instead make better use of what we have. Let's hear the arguments for it. Kay, welcome to the Interchange Recharged podcast. I'm so thrilled to have you here.
I'm glad to be here. I love what you're doing.
Thank you so much. So we'll be having several conversations with other players about how we need to optimize existing assets. And it can be existing projects, it can be existing transmission. So tell me more about what you're doing at Dynamic Grid and how can we get more from whatever is already available.
My day job is Dynamic Grid. We are basically a controls company. So we provide microgrid controllers and very unique distributed energy resource management system for utilities, which is still in prototype stage. But our newest initiative is flexible energy storage for C&I customers. Our plant will be up and running in the first quarter. So to answer your question about, we need all of the above solutions in a way.
Yes.
We're talking generation, we're talking transmission, and we're also talking distribution. I think one of the big problems is going to be on the distribution cycle. I have a researcher friend who's calculated, he's modeled 12% of all of the U.S. distribution infrastructure and then assumed, what if we did full electrification?
Oh, wow. Okay.
And what he's found is about $10 trillion in distribution level improvements.
10 trillion.
10 trillion, and that will dwarf what we need to do on the generation side.
Oh, wow. Okay. And there's definitely not enough budget there, too.
There's not enough budget for there. So that's the key in my mind is how do we optimize our distribution system? And that's what I work on extensively for both the DOE with the Gridwise Architecture Council, Microgrid Resources Coalition, MRC, and then also with the UN worldwide as a senior advisor to something called the Building Action Coalition that intersects how do we build high-performance buildings with the grid and how do we make them work together.
So it seems like this need to optimize existing assets and especially like getting more value from whatever is available on the transmission side is a global challenge.
It's definitely a global challenge. In the U.S., Europe is a little bit better, but in the U.S., we only use about 45% of our distribution infrastructure right now from a throughput standpoint. So we design for peaks, and you have to have a peak. You have to design for peak. So the key is how do we get that percentage, that utilization factor from 45% to 70% or so.
Okay.
And we do that with energy storage, we do that with controls, load flexibility, a whole suite of technologies on how to optimize the distribution system.
So you said we need to move beyond building infrastructure. Obviously, you need to implement new solutions. You mentioned energy storage. You mentioned there is new technology available to optimize existing assets. But how is that really looking like in practice? Because I would think we have heard feedback from like the utility perspective, they're kind of more risk averse. So it's difficult to implement new technologies, or at least that's what I've heard from the market. I don't know if you have felt something different by working closely with transmission owners and just...
Yeah, so yesterday I spoke on what we call operational coordination at a GWAC meeting. And that is really my focus. And so there's a twofold problem there is one, utilities are risk adverse. Mm-hmm. So they have their SCADA systems, they have their ADMS systems. Sorry, I'm using a pile of acronyms. But there's also a bigger problem is how regulators regulate utilities. Mm-hmm. And utilities have traditionally been doing something called regulated by cost of service regulation. Okay. Whatever they spend, they get return on. And that biases the utilities toward investing in hard iron, what I call heavy iron.
Okay.
New substations, new transmission, new distribution lines. Mm-hmm. So they have an incentive to do this. So we really need, as an industry, and this is a call out to regulators, is to change to new, in general terms, people call it performance-based regulation, which stresses saving customers money.
Okay.
So if you can find a way to fund utilities through savings that they provide to consumers, the system becomes cheaper. They still have a business model and make their money, but utilities are very, very risk adverse to doing that. They just don't really accept it, and it's a hard road.
So I have like two questions tied to that. The first one is, isn't it difficult to prove savings on a new technology initiative? Like, isn't that part of the challenge of why we're not seeing a more widespread adoption of these new technologies?
It's part of the challenge. I actually had a project, unfortunately, it's probably been canceled by the Trump administration, called Connected Communities, where we were trying to come up with those numbers. So I had a project in Maine to put my DERM system on, and there was a substation that needed to be rebuilt. It was a $14 million rebuild, and then there were overall on the 5 circuits we were working on was going to be about $20 million worth of infrastructure improvement. Okay. Under the old model, the utility is getting about $1 million a year. What we wanted to do is we could do a project for under $2 million.
Okay.
Big savings for consumers. Well, now, okay, there's a gap, 20 to 2, that's $18 million. Figure out how to pay a bonus to the utility to do it that way.
Yes.
And if you do it right, United Kingdom has a really nice program called RIO that basically puts a cap on the amount of money that they can recover. So the drive is always to find operational efficiencies and bring the price down. Okay. That wins for the utility and also wins for consumers.
So this is kind of tied to my second question about, like, what is the regulatory environment right now? Like, is it really helpful for implementing these type of new solutions, or what needs to change?
Unfortunately, it's not. Unfortunately, it's not. And I spend a lot of time in the regulatory sector talking to regulators. I've got initiatives in New Orleans, and I got initiatives in California. Also, what's called NARUC in the United States, the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners, talking to them on how they can actually transition the system. The system with cost of service worked when we were trying to build assets. We were trying to run lines, rural electric lines. We were trying to run as many lines as quickly as possible. So it really leveraged private capital.
Okay.
We're no longer in that environment. The lines are already there. So now it's about optimization.
Yes, totally.
It's not only technical optimization, but also regulatory optimization.
Yep. And I think it's something that we're seeing not only on the transmission side. There has been a big push on the interconnection side and rethinking how we're managing all these new generation that is coming online and this new load as well. So it seems like a major shift on how we're thinking about how we're doing things. And it requires a lot of innovation, a lot of talking with the regulators, and a lot of education too.
Yep.
Like making them understand like this is valuable because of XYZ, because otherwise we're not going to meet all the new goals that we have as a country to have more load and to meet all the new growth in demand that we're expecting over the next few years.
Yeah, one of the paradigm shifts that regulators have to make is get away from what I call regulation by docket.
Okay.
So they only make decisions based upon what is brought to them.
Okay.
So a new rate tariff or a new pricing for the next 3-year rate plan.
So it's more like reactive.
It's
So whatever
it's very reactive. So I'm working with I can't mention where, but there's a jurisdiction in the U.S. that I'm working with right now to build a long-term plan for their energy transition. And a part of that is how can they change the regulatory structure to get their goals, reach their goals. We tentatively have agreements to do this plan with a pile of international experts, but we'll see if it comes to.
Oh, hopefully we can see more about that in the next few, I don't know, months?
Probably in the spring sometime.
Okay, awesome. So switching gears a little bit, like we talked about transmission, you have also been very vocal about geothermal and storage and the role that they play in grid optimization. So why do you see these technologies mattering so much in everything related to grid reliability?
So this is where I do agree with the current administration.
Okay.
We do need baseload power.
Yes.
All right. The question is, what is our mix of baseload power?
Yes,
and geothermal is a wonderful baseload power. And interesting, my company's co-founder with me, found the first large-scale geothermal resource in the Salton Sea in Southern California.
Oh, wow.
In the late 70s. And been a wonderful resource for the last 50 years. And we need more of those, because storage plays well with it. Solar can handle a lot of the daytime stuff.
Yes.
It can also, if there's excess, it can go into storage.
Yep.
Storage can replace peaker plants. Peaker plants now, I just heard, peaker plants now, gas peaker plants are running $3,000 a kilowatt now.
Oh, wow.
All right. I don't know exactly what that would work out to with kilowatt hours, but utilization is a factor. If you're only running the peaker for a 4-hour day, that power might cost you 20, 30, 40 cents a kilowatt hour. Storage can easily compete with that.
Totally.
I'm right now in certain applications producing a levelized cost of storage at below 18 cents a kilowatt hour.
So like the business case is there.
Business case is there.
So it seems like then why are we not seeing more of that?
Well, we are. I mean, we've put more batteries in the last year than we've done the 3 or 4 years before that.
Yeah, that's true.
So we're seeing the use cases. We're seeing a lot of use cases where prices are going. California is a prime example. Prices are going up, and it makes sense for consumers put solar on their roof, put in storage, time shift their load, and they win and make money.
Yes, perfect. So hopefully we can still see more of that. I know that there are some challenges on the policy side, and it's something that we're exploring right now at the conference, like how's everyone thinking about these challenges and also the opportunities that this market volatility is bringing. But I know that the common word that I've heard so far is uncertainty. So it's something that we're all facing together.
Definitely uncertainty. I lost multiple millions of dollars in investment in about 12 hours when the bill came out.
Yeah.
I have clawed back most of it.
So it was more like a reaction, like, how is it called? Knee-jerk reaction?
It was definitely a knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah.
I had a very large strategic who was prepared to put in $1 million. At least they were seriously talking about it. We're still early in the conversations, and they decided to pull out of the U.S. market.
Yeah. And some other thing that you've discussed is on the incentive side and how solar in particular has been very dependent on these incentives.
Yeah, this is where maybe after I leave this room, I better watch myself, and I might get stabbed in the back.
You're not the first one that have said like the dependence of solar on incentives. And it's like from a business perspective, an LCOE perspective, solar doesn't really need the incentives to remain economic. But it's obviously easier to make a business when you have that support from the government.
Yeah, I have a really good case in point is I have a very dear friend who just got a solar quote. I designed the system for her just to kind of do it, right? And she got a quote for $59,000 for a solar battery storage, which should have been less than $35,000.
So I guess like my question is like, what needs to change there? So it's just like
this industry's got to get innovative. So my energy storage is on CapEx is not competitive. We're twice the expense, twice the price of LFP right now. But we also last 20,000 cycles versus LFP lasting 4,000 or 5,000 cycles.
Okay.
We also can be higher power. We can also charge twice or 3 times a day. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of competitive advantages if you know how to sell those competitive advantages.
Okay.
So the key is really about sales innovation and optimization innovation, figuring out how to do for instance, racking cheaper, and how to use robotics to install panels on grid scale. There's companies doing that now, which should bring down the cost of utility grade solar a lot. So there's all kinds of the industry's got to grow up.
So what are you looking forward to the most? Like it can be on the utility side, it can be like all the other work that you've been doing in the US and abroad. Like there's so many solutions that we can implement. So
I think the holy grail is really distribution automation, is really how to use AI and really light duty AI. I can run a lot of my control technology on a Raspberry Pi. All right?
Wow.
We don't need much processing power. Which is one of our unique IP is the fact that we don't need large computers to run a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
I think the distribution system is where that $10 trillion, we can't afford $10 trillion, and we got to find ways to do it. And the value's there. We can get it done.
Perfect. So I'm really looking forward to see like the new solutions that you come up with, implement, and to see the success cases of.
Yeah. It's just very hard to implement because utilities are risk adverse, as you said.
Yeah. So hopefully we can see more on the utility side front too, like they being more vocal and active about the new solutions that are out there and more open to adopting them. So I don't know, maybe they're going to surprise us. I may be overly optimistic.
I got a phone call 2 weeks ago from a utility company said, "Hey, we need to talk. We need to figure out how to do this." So I'm seeing change.
Love it. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sylvia.
One of the pillars that holds up the grid is large battery storage. I'm talking 100 megawatt plus. Now, you might have heard what Chris Wright, Secretary of Energy at the DOE no less, said yesterday. He said that solar and wind are, quote, essentially useless when it's dark or when the wind doesn't blow. Greater reliance on renewables, he also said, effectively creates a whole separate grid that raises overall costs. Cue the mockery on social media. Elon Musk, somewhat surprisingly, was the one to point out that batteries exist. That brings me to the next part of the show, a look at large-scale battery storage systems. Is there a perception that batteries are too expensive or too inefficient? Anna Astretsova is VP of Finance at GridStor, a builder and operator of grid-scale batteries. She joins me now to look at the current state of the battery sector in the US.
There is definitely capital. The question is the cost of that capital, both on the equity side and on the debt side, the cost is going up. And so that really then leads to higher prices on the offtake and on the energy side. So how do we address that, and whether the market's going to get comfortable with the new normal, or what would even new normal be, it's still TBD.
Anna, welcome to the Interchange, first of all. How is the show going for you so far?
It's been great. It's honestly my first RE+.
Wow.
Yeah. The word that I hear a lot is overwhelming.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also I would say it's really magnificent. It's pretty impressive. I've been in the industry for a while now, and it is really heartwarming to see how many people are involved and how many companies are contributing. And it just, despite all the challenges or uncertainties, people are still here and pushing forward. So it's definitely very impressive.
It's definitely a great forum to connect with everyone and really understand what different challenges are there in the industry. We all know that there are challenges, right? In the podcast, we have talked time and time again about uncertainty. It seems to be the word of the past few months. So how are you seeing that from the GridStor perspective? What are the different challenges that you're seeing and also the potential solutions? Because there's so much to do.
Yeah, no, certainly uncertainty is the word of the year, and maybe it's the word actually for our industry. It's been like this for a while, ever since I remember. So I would say it's nothing new from that perspective. I think we've gotten a couple of years that we're hoping for certainty and people were preparing for certainty and getting in the certainty mindset, but it has been taken away for us. But we are, I think, well equipped to deal with it, so learning from the past experiences.
Definitely. And you are in the financing side for front of the meter storage, large-scale storage, right?
Correct.
So it seems like storage is in a very unique position, particularly after the passage of OB3. So what are you seeing? What conversations have you had so far?
Right. So a lot of time that we spend this year is preparing for OB3. So we, like anyone else, we didn't know the outcome. So we had to prepare. Same with, recently released new guidance for start of construction.
Yes.
Same, storage has been, spared from the changes. However, we also had to prepare and expect what would happen if that didn't happen. So a lot of our thought process and I would say resources, a lot of time was spent this year thinking about how to address it and what's the best way to, I would say, position ourselves to deal with any kind of changes that might be coming up.
What measures are developers taking to increase their confidence and being able to face all the new challenges brought by OB3?
Yeah, so I would say we're definitely doing a lot of modeling. So as a finance person,
oh my God, yeah,
a lot of modeling and
how many scenarios are you running now?
Definitely in hundreds. We wouldn't run a lot of scenarios in the normal day, but with uncertainty, it definitely tenfold of different scenarios. So definitely being more thoughtful about the risks that we're taking. Kind of, I think a big part of it is de-risking what you currently have. Right, de-risking what you can, the projects that you have in the foreseeable future, or maybe even thinking ahead, and how do we can make sure that the projects that we have confidence in succeed within the framework that we're given, right? So a lot of people obviously are talking about safe harbor.
Yes.
So safe harbor is a topic on everyone's mind. So we are not, immune to that conversations, and we're also talking safe harbor. And I know a lot of my team on the procurement side dedicates a lot of time and space for that conversation.
Yeah, so you just had a panel right here at RE Plus. You were one of the panelists, and what did you discuss there? Is it innovation on the business model itself, on the regulatory side, from the financing perspective? How are you thinking about all these changes happening?
Right. So from the financing perspective, we don't see yet a huge impact from the OB3 or the changes, because most of the projects that are going financing, they safe harbor, they're already under construction.
Okay.
There is certainty. The tax credits that we're selling at 25, 26, those projects are also squarely within the framework, well understood. The only thing that is uncertain, might be uncertain on that side, is tariffs, right? If your batteries for us and not, for example, onshore. How do we make sure that we de-risk that? And that can be addressed in several ways. The most straightforward one is to buy and ship batteries earlier.
Yep.
Obviously. However, it's not good for the project economics, right? You spend your capex early.
Yes.
You cannot necessarily finance the project yet because the construction hasn't started, so you don't have access to financing. So maybe you can have a warehouse facility, what people call the construction warehouse facility, but those are tricky to find for developers who are not sufficiently scaled or large.
Yes.
Right? So for smaller players, if you don't have sufficient amount of batteries that you're procuring, it's a smaller size, say $20 million you need, banks would not be interested in that kind of volume. So that's tricky. So you would have to put up equity to procure those batteries. So there's definitely conversation as well.
So would you expect that there will be a wave of consolidation in the market precisely because this element that you're mentioning, like not everyone can disburse such large amounts of capex without fully like starting construction in the near term?
Yes, for sure. I think there's something that is being talked about quite a bit in the industry, the consolidation, as well as, the development itself now takes longer.
Yes.
It is more expensive, particularly on the deposit side, right? We have actually just announced we closed the letter of credit facility with NordLB a few weeks ago. To help us with the letters of credit for our early stage development assets or tolling agreements, right? So we are very grateful for that partnership. That, again, is maybe not accessible to everyone in the market. Mm-hmm. So when you ask to put up a $5 million, $10 million deposit, if your only avenue is a cash deposit, that might be tough for the smaller developers.
So then, do you expect that we could see some innovation? I don't know if it would be on the business model side. There seems to be room for improvement in order to have more player or make it a more even ground for different players or of all different sizes. So is it possible to really do that, or what needs to happen in order for these to change?
It's hard for me to say what's going to happen, obviously. But overall, what I've been hearing is part of this consolidation, or kind of the next phase. Maybe we can expect hope to expect the interconnection queues to become less crowded.
Yes.
And for that reason, maybe the interconnection processes would become less lengthy. However, in the previous experience, time and time again, we were expecting that to happen. It hasn't happened yet.
Yes.
But certainly, the interconnection queues are very cost prohibitive currently for smaller developers.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, there's a glimpse of hope there, after for quarter 2023, and then we have already seen implementation at different ISOs. So it seems like there are some steps being taken in order to improve everything related to interconnection, but definitely there's still a long way to go.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily an interconnection expert, but I do know that in many of these instances, what happens is then ISOs require securities earlier and bigger securities, right? I mean, that's a natural kind of step. If you want to, without non-serious players, you want to make sure people are invested. However, I'm not sure how good it is for smaller players.
Yeah, that's true.
It is more likely that bigger players kind of can afford, as we just discussed, with the letters of credit or surety bonds or some other instruments that are accessible to them, access those queues then.
Definitely. So we touched on interconnection, but what are the other gaps that you're seeing that are slowing development? And it can be on the utility scale storage side from GridStor, but also any other conversations that you had with different players.
Another part is definitely what is progressing on the storage side, particularly, is the offtake. So we're moving away. When I started GridStor in just earlier phase of the energy storage development in general. A few years ago, we've seen merchant energy storage take off, right? In ERCOT and then CAISO, partially merchant with rate contracts. Now, as the industry is moving in the different regions, WAC or SPP, there is not really a merchant market in those areas. So we need a fully contracted offtake, right, to unlock the financing and generally get comfortable putting up significant capital to work. So it's just a conversation what will happen with the storage offtake over the next few years. It is a very different offtake than for solar and wind with the PPA, right? You're producing energy, you're selling it. It's fairly straightforward. With the tolling agreement on the batteries, more about shifting the load, 24/7, and the availability of energy where you need it. It's a different framework and different mindset. So it's something that is very interesting to see how people start thinking about that.
And it's much more complex because, as you mentioned, like with wind and solar, you only generate and like there's not much science beyond that,
right,
to oversimplify. But then for storage, like you need to think about how is the battery interacting with the grid, and then how is that interacting with the load that you have contracted, and how everything plays together.
Exactly.
So it's like much more. And I've heard like there's a lot of innovation going on, particularly on the software optimization side. So I think the more that we see these types of solutions being adopted, more sophisticated the grid becomes as well.
Yes.
And there's much more opportunity for more players to participate.
Yes, 100%. I've learned a lot even myself coming from solar and wind side and the pure energy storage, how markets operate. When you're a solar developer, you don't really need to think about how your electricity is being sold, energy arbitrage, ancillary services. All of that was new to me when I joined the energy storage side, but it's definitely much more interesting and rewarding. And I think it takes the industry and people some time to process it and kind of understand how to structure contracts around that. But in addition, as you mentioned, like how do you operate your battery, right? Cycling, we just talked on the panel how cycling, people don't really think much about cycling when they run the models, but it really drives your degradation of your battery, the use case of your battery, right? Whether it's worthwhile to cycle your battery or not worthwhile to cycle your battery at that particular time. So it's something that we need to be mindful of.
Definitely. What innovations within GridStor are you the most proud of right now?
Yeah, so for me personally, on the financing side, as I mentioned, that the facility that we closed with NordLB on the letters of credit was a very proud moment. In addition, we're working with brokers such as Brown & Brown to tap into surety bond market. And it's been really great to be able to structure those solutions to enable the early stage development, which, as we discussed, now requires much more capital and it's much longer term. So being able to put the securities, which enables a much lower cost of capital than cash, has been really a really proud moment for me and my team.
Awesome. So right now, what is the biggest challenge that you're seeing at GridStor? Like, we already touched on a bit of those. So I'm interested in knowing the challenges, obviously, but how are you addressing them?
Question, how we're addressing it with a lot of thought, a
lot of models, a lot of scenarios.
a lot of scenarios, And as I said, just de-risking as much as possible while storage has been spared on the ITC and, start of construction, we're still going to face the FEOC restrictions in January. And that's, I think, is still TBD how that's going to be impacting the industry. Particularly storage has been impacted by it because we have a higher FEOC threshold on the percentage side. And The batteries also, the capex of the battery for the battery storage project, the battery is a much larger percentage of the capital stack as opposed to in solar, the panels. So we really need to dig deep into that. And all I know so far about that there's so many opinions about how that's going to go, and there is no agreement whether, some people think the what came through in the bill is not as bad as it could be, which is true. However, devil is in details, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of conversations and a lot of analysis on that side, how to comply, and it still remains to be seen whether it's something that we can work with.
Yeah, and I think it's something, it's not limited to GridStor. I know that the entire industry is thinking about how they're thinking about FIAC, and also from the manufacturing side, it has been very interesting, like evaluating whether or not it's worth it to invest in having FIAC compliant like equipment, because it requires an additional investment, right? So is that still going to be needed over the next few years? And I have seen, particularly on the solar side, like manufacturers just saying like, well, I'm going to invest all this money, but what if people go and source modules from somewhere else that is way cheaper, which is something like an avenue that some developers are definitely taking. So a lot of dynamics playing out right now on how the supply chain looks like, and ultimately how it affects project development.
I think it's the same kind of analysis that we had to do on the domestic content, right?
Yes.
When the domestic content standard was introduced, whether you source a procure a domestic product or overseas, whether it's worthwhile. I think with the FIAC, the compliance part of it, I think, will be very burdensome as well. So it's another aspect.
Yeah, and just to wrap up, how do you see the clean energy finance landscape changing in the U.S. over the next few years?
There is no shortage of capital currently. I still see that people want to invest. So there is definitely capital. The question is the cost of that capital.
Yeah.
Both on the equity side and on the debt side, the cost is going up. And so that really then leads to higher prices on the offtake and on the energy side. So how do we address that, and whether the market's going to get comfortable with the new normal, or what would even new normal be, it's still TBD. However, as based on this conference, things are very vibrant still, and we have a lot of good things going on in the future.
Yeah, so there's a lot to look forward to, and there's also a lot of work to do.
There's always a lot of work to do, that's for sure.
And this has been great. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Sylvia.
Thank you for tuning in, and thank you to every one of our guests that joined me today at RE+. Stay tuned for more content on the conference over the next few days. See you next time.